Welcome back to CBC News BC. I am Jessica Chung here in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Okay, here's what you need to know today. We're going to start with some developing news out of Prince George. A portion of the downtown area there has been blocked off by police due to a potential bomb threat. Now, police have closed and taped off the area around the courthouse from 2nd to 3rd Avenue and from Queensway to George Street. Now, the courthouse itself has been evacuated. Police, bylaw, and sheriff vehicles are all on scene, and members of the public are being asked to avoid the area. To Vancouver now, the memorial honoring the 11 people who were killed and the dozens injured in the Lapu Lapu Day Festival tragedy has been moved. Now, this is what the corner of 43rd Avenue and Fraser Street looks like now that the city has moved the memorial. City staff transported the items from that roadside memorial to a temporary memorial at Mountain View Cemetery. Now, the city says it did this following consultation with victims and their families. Now, the massive roadside memorial was erected after a driver rammed into a crowd at that Filipino festival back in April. And the city is asking anyone who wishes to leave items of remembrance to bring them to the cemetery. And meanwhile, discussions are ongoing about putting together a permanent memorial. The Lil'wat First Nation says it's disappointed with the duration of a closure next month at Joffrey Lakes Park, that's east of Pemberton. Now, that park will be closed to the public for a month from September 2nd to October 3rd. But the nation is calling for a longer closure to allow Indigenous people to reconnect with the land and hold ceremonies.
It's very disappointing and disheartening. This is not reconciliation, right? This is a continuation of colonial decision-making, disregarding our needs and values on the land. So, it's very disappointing at this time.
Now, Environment and Parks Minister Tamara Davidson says the decision on the closure dates balances cultural practices, conservation goals, and public access to the park. And the BC Wildfire Service says the Mount Underwood fire on Vancouver Island is now considered held. Now, that blaze started last week, burning more than 35 square kilometers of forest just south of Port Alberni. Now, it was showing aggressive behavior, spreading rapidly until rain finally arrived last Friday. Now, yesterday, a handful of evacuation alerts and orders were either rescinded or downgraded. The Wildfire Service says the fire is not expected to grow beyond its current perimeter. Now, August is a special month for stargazers. Now, the Perseid meteor showers have peaked, but you can still see the odd falling star here and there. Now, this week, we're being treated to what's being called a planet parade, where 5 to 6 planets will be visible before sunrise.
If you go out in the morning, just before sunrise, and you look toward the east, you'll be able to see Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter appearing to be kind of in a line in the sky. If you keep going along an arc and look towards south, you'll eventually see Saturn. And what's hard to see is along that arc, there's also Uranus and Neptune.
He says you'll need a telescope or binoculars to see Neptune, and the next planet parade will be in 2028. And that's it for now. I am Jessica Chung. You are watching CBC News BC. Don't go anywhere because BC Today is up next.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We're less than a year away from Vancouver hosting matches as part of the Men's World Cup. But some are concerned the massive event will push people out of parts of downtown amid FIFA's stringent hosting contract. What do you think of those concerns? And in our second half, it's almost that time. Kids will soon be going back to school. But how many will be properly fed? We'll hear some concerning numbers and a push to help more students. I'm Dan Burritt, in for Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. Thank you for joining us on radio, TV, and on our live stream. You're welcome to call us now on our top story. Amid concerns about possible displacement because of the Men's World Cup matches coming to Vancouver next year, what do you think about people being moved? What do you think about the restrictions that FIFA is placing on parts of downtown, particularly close to BC Place Stadium, and this idea of beautification? Give us a call now, 1-800-825-5950, or hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Please be pulled over hands-free. In Metro Vancouver, the number is 604-669-3733. You can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, or send us a comment on our TikTok live at CBC, British Columbia. So we're looking ahead to the 2026 FIFA Men's World Cup and the impacts it could have on Metro Vancouver's most vulnerable, among other people. The City of Vancouver's host city agreement included guidelines for visual beautification measures, which we now know are after parts of it were made public earlier this year. Advocates are raising concerns about the tournament possibly displacing people without homes. Now, the city has sent CBC News a statement saying it has no plans to relocate those who are unhoused. First United Executive Director Amanda Burrows recalls how her organization responded to the city's strategy during the 2010 Winter Olympics. Speaking with On the Coast host Gloria Makarenko, she says the city's approach did not curb the long-term issue.
2010, when the Olympics was here, First United was already a well-established charity in the community, but overnight, basically, we got the funding and the request to become a shelter. So we had 300 residents living in our church when we did not have the capacity to do that. And I know that on the street outside, the people that were homeless that we used to see were no longer there. We could see, police and security, but they were definitely inside our church. And once, I guess, the party was over, homelessness obviously still is persisting, that we maintained the levels of service, yet we didn't have the same funding that we got during the Olympics. So we were really trying to scramble and respond. And obviously homelessness persists to this day. We still respond. We operate a shelter. It now has 50 people in it. But what this anxiety and everything that's coming up from this is we just recognize we have a history of, when there are bigger events, we have bigger sweeps. And we just don't want to be responding to homelessness this way by just hiding it. We want some actual long-term solutions.
Amanda Burrows with First United. Again, give us a call now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. Leave us a comment on our TikTok Live. We already have a call in. Charles, we're going to get to you in just a moment. What could the impact of the upcoming Men's World Cup have on vulnerable people's situations, and do you have concerns about the impacts on the tournament in the city? Now, those, as we heard some reference to the 2010 Olympics, the organizers of that event heard similar concerns during the bid process and in the run-up. Someone who knows that run-up and the games very well joins us now. Arthur Griffiths, chair of the Vancouver Olympic Bid and former owner of the Vancouver Canucks. Arthur, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks very much, Dan.
First of all, appreciate your time. What do you make about, first of all, the preparations the city is making to host 7 World Cup matches next year?
Well, I mean, it's at the very best, it's a massive undertaking by the city, the province, and of course the country to host an event like this. And we know what that was like with the Vancouver Whistler Olympics. So it's something that we're familiar with, but it's one of those things where you just have to put your best foot forward and have the right agenda.
Mm. Are you involved in the run-up to the Men's World Cup matches coming here?
No, but I can hardly wait to see some of the games.
Yeah. And how does it, based on your experience with 2010 and what you and other experiences with big events. How do you think these games, these matches, are going to compare in terms of scale and intensity with 2010?
Well, don't forget the Olympics is multiple venues across multiple parts of the Lower Mainland, and of course Whistler. So and an extended period of time. So as opposed to 7 events, essentially, we have multiple events every day in the Olympics. So my take is it's similar but dissimilar in that sense. But I think that what we recognize is that it's a full team effort, and I was listening to what Amanda had to say about the Vancouver Olympics, and I concur. You need to be looking at the immediate term on the issue, which is the homelessness and the long term. So if there's a way to drive focus towards a need, which this would be for the street people living on the street, then I think that's a good thing. If we can find solutions to do that.
Let's go to Charles now in Kamloops. Charles, what do you make of some of the concerns you're hearing?
So thank you very much for taking my call. And I'll preface this by saying it's not going to be the most popular opinion. But when I'm looking at it, I think it's a great idea. I think that this should be something that we're doing regularly, is that we should be going and clearing these homeless people out. And I don't mean people who are down on their luck. And I know that there are a lot of root causes that need to be addressed to this. But as far as I'm concerned, we need to be removing these people from the tax-paying citizens areas in our cities. Like, they are congregating in large groups. They are very vagrant. They are not clean, and it is dangerous. So I take my drive to work every day, and I'm talking dozens of them all over the street. They're on the street. It doesn't look good. And if we're just doing this for one-off big events, why aren't we doing it constantly? Why aren't we constantly cleaning up these messes? And I know that they've got to put them somewhere, but why does it have to? Why don't we take them out of town and find a spot for them and put the services farther out of town so that the people that have to go about their day-to-day don't have to deal with them?
Charles, just to clarify, people who are unhoused in some capacity, if they're buying items, they are still paying taxes, and they are still totally citizens of the province. What would you be prepared to pay? For example, you in Kamloops, we know that there's been concerns around rising homelessness in that city. What would you be prepared to pay more for if those services to help those without homes be increased?
Well, I don't even know if some of them don't even need homes. I don't even think that they want to live in homes. If I were seeing part of my tax revenue going towards maintaining a section of Crown land for them to live on and have services that are tied to what they have to deal with, I would be fine with that. It would get them. I wouldn't be dodging crackheads and potholes on my way to work at this point. That would be something I would totally be fine with my tax dollars going towards if they were out of sight, quite frankly. And I know it's not a great thing to say, but this is where I'm at with it. It's been decades of this. This isn't something that's new, and it's only getting worse.
All right, Charles, appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Just before we get to another call, we'll go to Harry in just a moment. Arthur Griffiths, we know that there were some concerns about police crackdowns during the Olympics. There were lots of protests leading up to that. A story from CBC in February of 2010 said that the, quote, feared police crackdown was absent during the games. If you can cast your mind back, how did you and the other organizers balance off the right to protest and free speech with getting the job done, if I can call it that, of running the games?
So I've been fortunate enough to work with a security company that has pulled off and worked for, including Vancouver, about 18 Olympic Games and some FIFA World Cup games. So I've seen how the operations work, and I've seen what the intent is. But the protests, as we refer to them as, Vancouver was just opening day or prior day before in Vancouver. Mm-hmm. Thereafter, what happened was that, and because these protests typically aren't people that are doing anything other than want to do damage. They're not advocating for a cause. They're usually trying to go through the Pacific Center, break in and do damage. They're not there to stand up for, a voice of some concern. We see it all the time now in Vancouver at the art gallery. So those are more than legitimate and appropriate. But at the end of the day, when they get out of hand, this is where you have to, frankly, step in and make sure that those people can't get a hold of rampage in the Pacific Center, for example, which was what was happening the first day before. But afterwards, I think people realize that those who were going to cause the damage, to a certain extent, they're good at it and they've done a lot of it over time, and they know what they're doing. And you have to make sure you step in and deal with them with police.
I do recall the day, I believe, after the opening ceremonies as a reporter for another station up the street, a group identified as the so-called Black Bloc were smashing windows at the Bay. And in fact, one of them went after a CBC cameraman. That did not end well for one of the protesters. But there seemed to be a shift away from some of that behavior, although we did see it on opening night of the Olympics with police using bicycles to barricade against some of those protests. Let's go to Nat in East Vancouver. Nat, what do you make of some of the concerns about this?
Yeah, I'd like to disagree quite strongly with the first few folks who've called in. And I feel like also your choice of someone to invite on. I really feel that the City of Vancouver, the province of British Columbia, and just our political leadership generally need to get their heads around, like, the point of a country, of a civilization, is not to make rich people like this gentleman who lives out in Kamloops, the people who run the World Cup, the people who've organized this whole thing, not to make rich, comfortable, powerful people even more, rich and comfortable, but to actually work for the people who need help in our society, such as people who are on the streets, such as working class people, people who are, can't find a way to live in this incredibly rich, in this incredibly wealthy, but incredibly unequal city.
Nat, do you think there's a way to do both, of hosting, and by that I mean hosting World Cup matches, big events, and taking care of those who are struggling?
I think we need to start treating these organizations as what they're supposed to be, right? Which is like recreation, which is celebration. It is something that should be working for the city and working for the people of the city. Whereas I think the way these large sporting events, especially, generally work, you see it all over the world. You see it in Brazil when they had the Olympics there. It was an excuse to go into favelas and literally shoot at, really poor, some of the poorest people in the world. I think we need to, accept how, cynical and corrupted a lot of these events have become, and actually start totally changing the way we think about this and having it work for people, having it work for the city, and not having our political leaders bend over backwards to enrich these people who've got more money than we could possibly imagine.
Nat, I appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Arthur Griffiths, we heard these concerns during and the lead up to 2010, how much money it would cost. We know that there was a significant increase in the security budget up to that time. How would you address people's concerns around the cost of hosting FIFA Men's World Cup matches in this city?
Well, I can say, and because I've got more knowledge of the Olympics and hosting the World, there's a few things that need to be recognized that were required for the Olympics. There was some venues, there was transportation, there was road enhancements, there was additional public facilities, namely ice rink up at Queen's Park and so on. And all of those things were brought on the convention center. All of those investments are long-term, and they were brought to bear at the same time once we were hosting the Olympics. Now, what's the other side of that? That generates not only the jobs for the people who are building all of these facilities, but then the future use of said facility, whether it's transit, SkyTrain, for example, convention center. When you host, that's called taxes. Those taxes, in the hands of the decision makers, including politicians, of course, at all levels, are there for these sorts of issues that people are concerned about, which is housing, mental health, and other such social causes that we cherish in this country, and medical. So to the extent that there's a balancing out that needs to be done, at least you've got the opportunity to host the world and people will focus on that. More importantly, the money will be spent for hosting. And at the end of the day, as I said, those are called tax dollars. When at the end of the day, when people come, they spend money, and there's taxes that are earned from that for us.
We're just having a slight delay on your line there, Arthur. But just before we get to another call, that's okay. I think we'll work our way through it for our listeners and viewers. To that extent, as you mentioned, there were a lot of things that were legacy projects out of that. As you mentioned, we've got the Olympic Oval, Sea to Sky Highway, the Canada Line, Hillcrest, public infrastructure that remained. Tax dollars from visitors are great, but what do you think the lasting legacy? It's not as though they're, as you said, we're not building new stadiums. Maybe a couple of new enhanced parks. What do you think the region's going to get out of this beyond tourism dollars?
Well, for an event like the FIFA, as I said, it's seven games. All right. And so every hotel, every possible place that people can conceive of, including restaurants and transit and I mean taxis as well as public transit. All of those events for those days and all of those facilities will be at full capacity, like no other, really. So we're hosting and the media's attention. So I'm always I'm an advocate for people being able to enjoy and experience something like a FIFA World Cup game. That is something that's lifetime opportunity for those, whether it be live or even just being part of the street parades, whatever the case may be. I think the idea that we can take that event and that opportunity to show people what a great place this is, that they want to come back. They may not even have ever been here. And that was the great experience we had from the Olympics. I worked in London. I worked in other Olympics. I've been to other Olympics and sporting events. And I see the vibe that we can create, more importantly, the economic engine that's generated by those events. And that's why I'm a strong supporter of it. But I also appreciate that there's a part of what you do and how you do it and what you do with the result is important to make sure that there's a legacy, which is that people, which unfortunately we struggle with in much of North America, is poverty on our streets.
Let's go to Lester and Vernon. Lester, thanks for waiting. What do you think?
I'm completely opposed to FIFA in Vancouver. I think that we should have learned enough lessons from the debacle that was the Olympics in 2010. We had Gregor Robertson at that point. He might look like Clark Kent, but I have a feeling as the Minister of Housing, he's not going to be much of a Superman for this country. Vancouver's still in a brutal housing crisis. The cost of living there is absurd. That's why I'm in the Okanagan now. I was priced out. You've got homeless people like crazy, unhomed people that are born and raised in Vancouver and have been priced out of the system. We've got bureaucrats signing up for this FIFA thing when there's far more pressing issues on the table. FIFA alone has a long history of corruption. Dozens of FIFA officials have been indicted for wire fraud and racketeering. We're talking bribery, corruption, all kinds of things. There's so many documentaries you can easily find on YouTube with credible sources that show just how corrupt this is. It's not in Vancouver's best interest, not to mention all the businesses around the area that are being put into these zones. It's like already hard enough to do business in that city. The costs of rent are insane. And now you're going to lock these areas down where people, just mom and pop restaurants and retail, are just trying to make their living in Vancouver. And we're going to shut it all down for what? For glamour and glitz for bureaucrats for a week. I'm not into it. I think it's a terrible idea.
Lester, appreciate your call. We're going to get to one more call just on that. Arthur Griffiths, he called it a debacle. We listed off some of the public infrastructure benefits. What about those businesses who may be concerned? Because we did hear from 2010, Olympia Pizza, if I remember right, on Denman, which had some Olympic officials asking them to, if memory serves, change their name. What do you think is going to happen here with businesses that are going to try to operate in this FIFA zone?
Well, I don't know if we're going to have another issue what we did with Olympic Pizza or Olympia Pizza, whatever. I forgot it was on Denman Street, I think. I don't know if there's going to be situations like that. Was a trademarking issue, and I thought it was a bit, unnecessary. But what the case is, and it didn't stop it. That business is still there. If I'm not pretty sure, I walked by there last weekend. There's, not everybody's a sports fan. Not everybody's wants to go to a concert, but I can't help but think that in the long run, what you can do is, with the benefit of hosting, whether it's FIFA or concerts, like I said, or hockey or basketball or football, near and dear things to my heart, is also spins out, which it does, feeds down the system to the, we watch our national team right now, the Canadian men's national team and women's team, obviously, perform. And I don't know, there are many Canadians that would argue that's not a good thing. So we and because the people, where did they learn to play the game? It's because they watched the sport. They fell in love with the sport. And as far as policing goes, I want to tell you a little anecdote, which I have, which is very first knowledge. I lived in London for a while. I worked on the London Olympics, and something that really, really blew my mind was just how they were able to control the crowd. You referred to the bicycles outside BC Place opening event for the Olympics. In England, they have these gargantuan mounted police. They're not there with batons. They're not there. They actually act as a mounted barricade, and they just control the crowd. So you're not going to go up against a horse that's taller than you are, and with somebody on top of it. So it was really, and that's what they do for not FIFA. That is just what they do to watch the Premier League game in England, and it's pretty clever.
Forgive me, I'm going to jump in. I'm just going to jump in for 1 sec while we take a quick break. You're watching and listening to BC Today. And let's continue. Arthur, forgive me for cutting off. Just had to finish a break in there. Continue with that, with the cops on horses.
Well, yeah. So in England, the Premier League games in England, they have mounted men police on these horses that when you're entering a venue like for example, Wembley, you're going into you're 90,000 people attending these events. Nobody's going to get out of hand because these horses are acting, like I said, a wall. And they close the wall off. You get to the horse, you stop, then they open up just like a toll booth almost, and then you move through, and then they close them off. So they control the crowd very, very intimidating way. And I think that's something that we can all learn from to manage the control of the crowds. People, and this is such a complex issue because I understand where people are coming from, and people are not happy with the streets and they're not happy. But I gotta believe that we can find a better solution than to what we have at the moment, from not just housing, but people on the streets and living on the streets and intimidating people who are trying to just simply work on the street. When I'm talking about the little shopkeepers. So we've got a major issue to deal with.
Let's go to our last caller. Peter's in Surrey. Peter, what do you think?
Well, I think this whole FIFA thing is basically a scam that's going to make hundreds of millions of dollars for some people and corporations, and they're taking advantage of Vancouver. What we should do is not just look at spin-off benefits, but tax them directly and use the money for housing, for our parks, for public transit. They're taking, like I said, advantage of Vancouver and the area, and we should directly benefit from it.
Peter, hang on just a sec. I'm going to
Sure.
Stay on the line. We're just going to come back from a break. Thank you for holding, Peter. Go ahead. You have a revenue idea?
Yeah, we should directly tax the corporations and the individuals who are profiting off of using the City of Vancouver, for their businesses. And that would be a direct way to help the people of Vancouver who are putting up with all of these problems and so on, and address some of the things like I mentioned, like housing and transit and those kind of issues, instead of just waiting for maybe some spin-off benefits because there's some more tourists coming in a couple of years or whatever. That's not really going to help people very much.
All right,
it's rather indirect.
Yeah, Peter, appreciate the call. Thank you very much. Arthur Griffiths, to wrap up, we're a year out. where do you see the city and other organizers in terms of maybe clarifying or, let's say clarifying what taxpayers, what visitors can expect in their experience here and what it's going to cost?
Well, I can't speak to that, but I would assume that there will be a communication strategy around all of these issues, because you better believe that the politicians and at all levels are listening. And I think that that's something that is also a good thing, is people are paying attention. So to the extent you focus on it, but there is pros and cons, and there are fans and there are detractors. I just happen to be one that's a fan of the sport. And sport in general. And it's not, and make no mistake, I'm not talking about the professional side only. I'm talking about the amateurs. So to the extent that we can find a way to bring the world here and showcase our beautiful city and our beautiful province and country and put our best foot forward, I think that's in all of our best interests. And never mind that there's an opportunity to raise, I'll call awareness, but also capital, and focus in on causes that are of concern to the people of the cities in our country.
Arthur Griffiths, former owner of the Vancouver Canucks and former chair of the Vancouver 2010 Olympic bid. We appreciate your time and your perspective. Thanks for joining us, Arthur.
Very much my pleasure. Thank you very much.
You sent us a lot of emails about this and a few other things. We're going to get to those in just a moment. But time for a news break with Taryal Parmar.
Good afternoon. The BC Wildfire Service says the Mount Underwood fire on Vancouver Island is now considered held. That fire started last week, burning more than 35 square kilometers near Port Alberni. It was showing aggressive behavior and spreading rapidly until rain arrived last Friday. Yesterday, a handful of evacuation alerts and orders were either rescinded or downgraded. Police say a man from Surrey has been charged in connection with a major drug seizure. RCMP say last summer, officers from the Uniform Gang Enforcement Team tried to stop a vehicle in Maple Ridge. They say they found fentanyl, meth, cocaine, as well as more than $40,000 after searching the vehicle and the alleged driver. The 31-year-old suspect is now facing several trafficking charges. And stargazers are enjoying what's being called a planet parade this week. Experts with UBC's astronomy department say 5 to 6 planets will be visible just before sunrise. You will even be able to see Neptune if you're using a telescope or binoculars. The next planetary parade will be in 2028. Those are your news headlines. For more information, you can go to the website cbc.ca/BC.
Taryal Parmar in our Vancouver newsroom, thank you very much. This is BC Today on CBC. We're on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC. Also on YouTube at CBC Vancouver and on the CBC News app. You sent us a lot of emails, as I said, on one of our topics yesterday: public service, military service, and volunteering. Pat says in part, this generation is living with the mistakes that the previous generation have made, and now we're asking them to fix it, not only without pay, without power, and how we fix it. Nathan, who says he's 20 years old, says, I'd be willing to volunteer if it was beneficial work for the environment and Indigenous communities who are still without clean drinking water. I'd be willing to volunteer if something in my life was paid for in return, like groceries, rent, phone bills, literally anything that would help young people get by. Yvonne in Qualicum Beach said, given the increase in climate chaos, I would love to see Canada have a form of a 1-year civil defense service. I think New Zealand and Costa Rica have forms of a civil defense. Another would be checking on neighbors and disasters, extreme climate events, build confidence in oneself, and perhaps working with animals in an agricultural area. Nancy says, in part, in either case, I'd like to see people traveling across Canada exposed to other parts of the country where they live. I'd also like to see all participants given basic communications training. Mike in Prince George says, when you volunteer, you're donating your time. Why can't we make a donation of time a deduction on our income tax? Perhaps Canada Revenue Service is listening, Mike. Patricia says volunteering gets people to do jobs for free that would have been paid. It takes jobs away from people. Teachers already volunteered by doing many free practicums. Bob says we must not forget volunteers are not a source of free labor. They give willing of their time, acts, and expertise. And Christian said he did military service. I'm the one who benefited greatly from compulsory training and having a year or two, perhaps, for people to reflect on career options. Well, back to school season is coming, and in just a few moments, we're going to discuss food insecurity and concerns leading up to that. In fact, we're going to get to that right now. The weather may be turning warm for parts of BC again, but we are creeping closer to the end of summer vacation for students across BC. Kids of all ages will go back to school, university, college, and trades programs in early September. But how many are going to go back fed and ready to learn and to work? It is a concern for Breakfast Club of Canada. It says a third of kids affirm arriving at school feeling hungry almost every day. So they're launching a fundraiser to try to cut those numbers and feed more students. We want to hear from you now. What do you think of students going to school hungry? If you were a parent or a guardian, are you finding it harder to feed your kids? What are those pinch points? Do you hear it from other friends and family members and other kids? Our number is 1-800-825-5950 across BC. In Metro Vancouver, the number is 604-669-3733. It's pound 690 on your cell. Please be pulled over hands-free if you're driving. Email us, bctoday@cbc.ca, and leave a comment on our TikTok Live. Joining us now is Taelyr Keeley, Programs Manager with Breakfast Club Canada. Taelyr, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Dan. Happy to be here.
What is summertime like ahead of school going back for your organization? How busy are you?
We are very busy. So we are gearing up to launch our back to school campaign, as well as for us coordinators getting ready to be able to support our schools on the ground and go to those communities that we support the school breakfast programs in.
And to clarify, how many kids and people do you help feed in BC?
So in BC, we help feed over 20,000 students and over 300 school nutrition programs.
20,000 students and 300 programs. And how long have you been doing that?
We've been doing that for over 30 years with the club, and I myself, this will be my third year here being a coordinator for BC.
Yes, coordinator, thank you. How much demand are you seeing compared from when you began to now?
Yeah, so unfortunately, the demand has increased by a lot. So we're seeing a 30% increase across the board here for students accessing breakfast programs throughout the country.
And what are the main reasons you're hearing from people when they say they're coming to you?
Yeah, so when I'm talking to school staff, parents, or students, we're hearing the main takeaways are the cost of living, the tariffs, and unfortunately, the really high cost of food in Canada, especially for more rural locations.
So it's and we've heard that from people of all stripes and all incomes, perhaps people who have a good meal every day, that they're feeling that pinch point. Are you noticing that it's more families? Who are the demographics of people coming to you for help?
Yeah, so the demographics are everyone, especially working families these days. There's a lot of misconception that, people experiencing food insecurity aren't working. But what we're seeing across the board is that these are families with one or two parents working. And we're seeing that translate more now to students needing that access to healthy food in the morning because, unfortunately, due to the economic times, they're not able to get that at home.
So last April, the federal government announced a national school food program, $1 billion over 5 years. Are you seeing any of that money now? And if so, what difference is it making?
Yeah, so here at the club, we're really excited that all the provinces and territories have signed up for the national school food program. We believe it's a great start, but unfortunately, it's still not meeting the need and filling that gap that we're seeing across Canada. So here in BC specifically, we're still seeing about 25,000 students that need that access to start their day off right with breakfast.
We also have the BC Feeding Futures program that was launched here in BC in 2023, $214 million over 3 years. That combined with the national school food program, what difference is that making?
So we're seeing across the board that, again, it's a great start. It's able to reach some students, but again, we're not able to reach the students that really need it most that we're seeing with this increased need. Obviously, as more students attend a breakfast program, the costs go up for being able to reach those students that are attending.
If you are a parent, if you are a guardian of a child, and you are finding it harder and harder to prepare your kids for the day with a nutritious meal, let alone perhaps just a meal, We'd love to hear from you. We know it's a sensitive topic. Our number is 1-800-825-5950. In Metro Vancouver, it's 604-669-3733. You can email us, bctoday@cbc.ca. We're also on TikTok at CBC British Columbia, pound 690 on your cell phone. Perhaps if you're not struggling, do you know somebody who is struggling? And what, perhaps, if you're helping them, we'd love to hear from you. Taelyr Keeley, when you go into these schools, when you work with some of these communities, there are probably all sorts of stories of people stepping up to help, what we don't hear about. Are you able to share any of those?
Yes, of course. So recently I was on a visit to a school in Zabalos, which is a remote community on Vancouver Island. And unfortunately, it's down an active logging road. It's quite remote. So what we're seeing there is that the principal themselves is making the 6-hour drive round trip to go to the grocery store on weekends, to do the grocery shopping, bring it back to the school and get set up for the day. As well as we're seeing EAs or teachers that are taking time out of their busy schedules as teachers or EAs to come early in the morning, prepare the food, and have it ready for the smiling faces that come to the program in the morning.
And in that school in Zabalos, how many students are they feeding like that?
They're feeding actually the whole school. There's around 25 students in the school, so it is a small school. But with small schools like that, having access to that food, like the breakfast program, is really imperative, especially in communities where they don't have a grocery store or that daily access to food.
And particularly when the principal, you say, is driving 6 hours round trip to get those things.
Yeah.
Let's go to the line. April is in Aldergrove. April, what do you think of this?
I know that feeding students is so important for their education, and having, your brain has the nutrition to take in education. But I also I think this is a missed social issue, and that, without being a top public education system provincially, honestly, I would much rather education funding go towards building the education system. And yes, it's a need, but I don't think the education ministry needs to take on the funding for this. I would much rather have a strong education system, and for those monies in that budget to actually go towards education than feeding. And I'm not saying it's not necessary to feed children, and I know families are struggling, but then money needs to be reallocated.
Where do you think where would you want that other funding to come from, if not from the education ministry?
Honestly, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where the best place is, other social programming and things like that. I appreciate that we're feeding kids and feeding communities, but and I know it's a closed community, that all the kids in the provinces, these are centers where all the kids are coming, and so it's easy to reach them all. But provincially, I think there needs to be some reallocation. I know millions of dollars are going towards food programs, and we're pushing kids through a no-fail system. There are still kids in higher grades who are not capable of reading or writing, and that is not because they're not being fed. Well,
in some cases, it might be because they're not being fed, if they're not being prepared and not ready to learn. I take your point, though, April, and thank you for the call. Taelyr Keeley, interesting that there are concerns about funding. There is one taxpayer. Has that been a topic around who should actually be paying for this?
Yeah, so this is a topic that we see, across the board, especially when it comes to government funding. But one thing to note is that Canada was actually the last G7 country to develop a national school food program. We have G7 countries like Japan, the United States, where this is written into law, and this is something that they've been doing for years. So something that we advocate for is a cost-sharing model, so not relying wholly on government funding, but also the private and public sector as well, and being able to share that costs really takes the burden away from one sector over the other. And then also when children are fed in the morning, they're able to better focus in school, and they have that better opportunity to learn. The statistics speak to that as well.
Let's go to Chris in Victoria. Chris, what do you make of this?
I think that there's an opportunity here for, a program to be put in place at all schools across the province where, I'm very privileged to be able to send my child to school, properly fed every day. But almost every day, something comes home in that lunch that's not eaten. And, I know when I was a kid, if there was a scenario where you weren't eating something at in the lunch area, there was someone that was walking around, saying, hey, if you're not going to eat that sandwich, put it on the tray. We'll offer it to someone who might not have enough food. Or if you're not going to eat that granola bar or whatever the case may be. I don't think that would be a really hard program to implement in every single school. You just need to assign a staff member to be able to do that over the lunch hour. And then the only other challenges around that might be, having to factor in things like allergies and things like that. But, I think that's an opportunity. I hear from other parents regularly that their kids also come home with their lunch boxes, half full and, not completely eaten. I think there's an opportunity for some of that extra food to be shared around if we can implement it.
Yeah. Chris, I appreciate your call. I can hear my mother in my ear wondering why I brought home a road or traveling apple that I didn't finish it at work or at school, I should say. Taylor, to that extent, are there programs in schools like that where they try and save, if we can call it, excess food or food that hasn't been eaten yet?
Oh, yes, definitely. So that's something that I see across the board here in schools in Vancouver, Richmond, where they'll have a place kind of like take a penny, leave a penny. So it'll be maybe near an office or something, and there'll be a basket there where children can place an item that they don't like and they can trade it for something else. And then this allows students to have, access or give them something that they normally wouldn't be able to eat at home.
Taylor, I wonder if you encounter this in your work, there will be parents, guardians, and kids who may feel ashamed about maybe being offered something extra that they feel that they ought to be able to provide, but they're just feeling so pinched. Is that a factor in your work?
Definitely. And this is why we highly encourage our programs to be universal, so that way anyone coming to the program, regardless of their socioeconomic background, anything like that, they can have access to that food. Because when you're only specifically trying to reach, let's say, a group that's in need, you're kind of creating a stigma around accessing, and you're separating them from, let's say, the general population. So that way, if everyone going to a breakfast program, regardless of their socioeconomic background, can be fed, then people are less inclined to ask or feel ashamed. And especially when we have teachers and other peers like that involved, it's really an opportunity to create that sense of community and bring everyone together around food.
Catherine is joining us from Victoria. Catherine, what do you think?
Good afternoon. I've had two children raised through the food programs, through elementary and high school. And the second one, just 18, decided to go through the culinary program. In its existence, it's included the food banks, the local food banks, in fundraising, community gardens, as well as preparing a child to budget and prepare food effectively and carefully. So in my words, what I've seen over 20 years is a lot of this falls to teachers to fundraise or to raise money within their own organizations when they fall short, which I found astounding. But it does happen, and no child has ever gone hungry with that. So in that perspective, we're teaching children to give back. We're teaching them good values, but it's still falling very short.
Right, Catherine, appreciate your call. Taylor, I saw you nodding along there. What do you think of what Catherine said?
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really important as well, and something that we love to suggest to schools is, having students involved in their breakfast program. So, for example, we have a school in Richmond where the grade 11 and 12 students are responsible for that. So they help create the menu, they help make everything, and they're gaining those valuable skills on, as she said, budgeting, cooking, grocery shopping, that kind of thing. And it helps, take that curriculum as well as feeding people, but you're learning.
Trudy is joining us in Vancouver. Trudy, what do you think of this issue?
Well, I think that there are cheap meals to be made and nourishing these days. If you know where to shop, or if you close by to an area where you get cheap food, for instance, in Chinatown or on Fraser Street, they have Chinese stores where they sell chicken backs and necks, where they sell cheap fish, herring, for instance. Herring is delicious if you know how to prepare it. Excuse me. So you can go by these days, even if you don't make that much money, to have a nourishing meal and be well fed.
Trudy, appreciate your call. Thank you very much. Interesting ideas there, Taylor. I guess with the culinary programs that are in there, students are learning to budget and they're learning about recipes and things. Easier to do that, for example, for families and whatnot, to go shopping in perhaps urban areas if they're looking for that. As you mentioned in Zabalos, if it's a 6-hour round trip, that's tougher for those remote communities.
Definitely.
Let's go to James in Spence's Bridge. James, what do you think?
Good day.
Good day.
I think there's a lot of schools in this country that have big playground zones that aren't fully utilized, that could be in part used for growing food. And the roofs of schools, any new school that's built, ideally should have rooftop gardens. And you can train the kids on how to grow their own food and provide some of the food to the students if required. And the old Harper Poilievre government, from what I understand, stopped prisoners from tending gardens. And perhaps we could have prisoners in this country growing food for the kids. Those are just a couple of my ideas.
I'll have to double check that prisoner thing, James. James, can I ask, do you have kids?
No, I don't. No.
Okay, not a problem. Thanks for the call, Taylor. What about? Growing food. It's a great idea if you've got the space, if you've got the sunlight and whatnot. That does also cost money. Are there schools out there that are doing it though?
Yeah, there are schools across the province that are utilizing school gardens for not only growing food and eating, but as well as connecting them back with their roots with traditional knowledge around land keeping and things like that. So there's lots of different ways that you can look at alleviating hunger. And some schools are using their gardens for their lunch and breakfast programs as well. But something that comes to difficulty is usually growing season is when children aren't in school. So that's the question, is how can we utilize those things when children aren't necessarily in school during those growing seasons?
Let's go to Patricia in New Westminster. Patricia, what do you think?
Oh, to fit me in. Thank you.
You bet.
I'm calling because I've spent a very long time working in public schools and working particularly with children who are impacted by poverty. Yeah. And of course, that includes the food programs at the schools that are an amazing thing. And the people that do it, I have so much respect for them. I think that, however, what we need to get back to is the idea that every family needs the respect and the dignity of being able to buy their own food for their own kids. And we need to get back to the idea of a universal basic income and enough money going to families from our taxes so that they can choose their own food.
Patricia, I appreciate your call, and I see that you spent 40 years in public school service, and we thank you for that. That's a lot of dedication. Taelyr Keeley, it's one thing for schools to do it. I think Patricia was intimating at this. There is a measure of dignity when families are able to do that on their own. But like everybody else, a lot of people in this country, I should say, everyone's feeling that pinch of inflation, tariffs, and other high food prices.
Definitely. And that's something we're seeing across the board. And that's why, the Breakfast Club of Canada, we're having this back to school campaign to raise awareness of those things. And then through that, we're able to help relieve some of that stress for families, because if they're able to send their child to school and they know they're going to get a nutritious breakfast, that money that would be spent on that can then be kept in their pocket, that they can then choose what they wish to buy for like medical expenses or different foods at home.
And a bit more on that fundraiser. Do you have a goal in mind? Tell us a bit more about that.
We don't have a specific number in mind, as we would like to be able to open as many programs as we can, and as well as strengthening the support that we already provide to our schools, as we're seeing our operational costs increase exponentially from that growing need. So really, we just want to be able to raise awareness and raise enough funds that we can support the schools that we're already supporting more robustly, but then also to bring on new schools.
And for people who want to get involved, perhaps they want to donate to this, how can they do it and when?
Yes, so the campaign is just starting now. So you can text club to 20222, or you can go to our website at breakfastclubcanada.org/back-to-school. Or if you're inclined to donate in store, Costco has a campaign from September 8th to 14th. Walmart has a campaign from August 28th to October 29th. And then IKEA is doing the campaign for us on September 13th.
All right. We appreciate your time and your perspective. Taelyr Keeley, Programs Coordinator with Breakfast Club Canada. Thank you again.
Thank you. Have a good day.
And that is it for our show on BC Today. Thank you for everyone for calling in and joining the discussion. A lot of you emailed. I will read some of those tomorrow. Again, email us anytime you want. bctoday@cbc.ca.